Anybody else? Thoughts, questions, anything? Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to keep going here. We've got a little ways to get yet. So verse 13, whoever endures to the end. Now remember I said don't make a note of where the beginning, right? Remember I said make a note of the beginning back in verse 8? Now we're at the end. But he that will endure to the end of the same will be saved. So the question is, what's the end and what was the beginning? So let's go back to verse 8. These are the beginnings of sorrows. Well, it said these are the beginnings of sorrows, and so the fact that he said these means he's pointing to something before that, right? Like if I say I've got a cow, a goat, and a chicken, these are my animals. If I were to just say to you, hey, these are my animals, but I didn't tell you I had a cow, a goat, and a chicken, you wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about. So now that I've said, I've got a cow, a goat, and a chicken, and these are my animals, if I say, Cody, these are my animals, what are they? What would you say? Cow, goat, and a chicken, right? So for us to know what these are, we need to refresh our memory real quick. For Jesus says, take heed that no man deceive you. We've got deception. Many will come in my name saying, I'm Christ, and will deceive many. You'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you aren't troubled. These things must come to pass. The end is not yet. Nation rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There's famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. These are the beginnings of sorrows. But then he keeps going. So he's just identified. We've seen the beginning of sorrows, and now we're going to keep going. And either we're still talking about the beginning of sorrows, or we're officially sorrows. Right? Like, this is the beginning of the movie. You're starting to watch it. Well, at what point are you officially in the movie? At what point are you officially watching the movie? If I said, hey, we're going to go watch Anne of Green Gables. Great movie. Anne of Green Gables. We're going to watch Anne of Green Gables. This is the beginning of Anne of Green Gables. And we all sit down with our popcorn. I turn it on and I say, this is the beginning of Anne of Green Gables. Here we go. At what point are we officially watching Anne of Green Gables and not the beginning of Anne of Green Gables anymore? Right? Yeah. The beginning is the starting point. It's not the movie. It's just the place that it begins, right? So here we are. We've had these things happen. Jesus says these are the beginnings of sorrows. If you lay that paradigm over the top of what Jesus says, that means that we're stepping into sorrows, right? These are the beginning of sorrows. We just read verses 4 through 8. Well, these are the beginning, which means that now what we're stepping into next are sorrows, right? These are the beginning of sorrows. Then they'll deliver you up, you'll be afflicted, and they'll kill you. Now let's talk about then, because then is an interesting word. Mike, you read this probably in the book, I bet. You said you read the book. The word then is an interesting word because then can have a couple of meanings. Then can be a back reference into something we've already spoken about, or then can be the next in a series of events. Let me give you a couple of examples. I'm going to drive to Dallas, and while I'm driving to Dallas, it's a boring trip. So then I'm going to make some phone calls because I don't have anything else to do. Versus, I'm going to drive to Dallas, it's a 3.5-hour trip, the traffic is horrendous, then when I get there, I'm going to make my phone calls. Now I can even leave the then when I get there, I'm going to make my phone calls. I can say it this way: I'm going to drive to Dallas. The drive will take all of my attention because it's horrific. Then I'm going to make some phone calls. In the first situation, I conveyed to you that the drive is boring, so I have the freedom to make phone calls during the trip. I'm going to drive to Dallas. It's a 3.5-hour boring trip. Then I'm going to make some phone calls. That could be interpreted as, because it's boring and there's nothing else to do, I'm going to make phone calls during my trip. When I gave you the context the other way, the word then can mean I'm going to make the trip and then do my phone calls because I don't have the brain power to do both phone calls and watch the traffic. So the word then can either point back into something that we've just referenced, or then can mean the next thing in a sequence of events. So we have to figure out when we read Scripture and we see the word then, which then it is. Is Jesus saying, I've talked about something, and in the middle of what I just finished talking about, this is the then? Or is he saying these things are going to happen, and then this is the next thing that's going to happen? You following me? Does that make sense? So we're going to see, one of the things that we're going to see all the way through this study, we're going to see it in spades when we get to the Revelation. When you look at Paul, when you look at Paul's writings, you'll see this in spades. Acts 28. When we talk about the word apantasis, the word meet, The word meet is a great word. We're going to have fun with the word meet. Paul appeals to Agrippa, and he's like, I appeal to Caesar. And he's like, to Caesar you will go. Paul begins the journey to Rome. He's going to go stand in front of Caesar, and he's going to be tried by Caesar. And it says, when the brothers from Rome heard that Paul was coming, they traveled as far as Appii Forum and the Three Taverns, and they met him, and they spent some time there. And when we came to Rome, is the next verse. So we have this picture. Paul coming this way, brothers coming this way, they meet, and then they go together to Rome, right? The story, though, is this continuous piece, and we're looking at it almost in hindsight. So that then piece is like we can be looking back and talking about it. And the Revelation, we get to Revelation 19, 20, 21, and 22, we're going to see what? I saw the New Jerusalem, the holy city, coming down out of heaven, dressed as a bride, prepared for its wedding. And then right after that, what do we see? We see the judgment happening, and everybody whose name's not written in the Lamb's Book of Life is thrown into the lake of fire. Well, which happened first? According to the Revelation, everybody was thrown into the lake of fire before we see the New Jerusalem. It says, everybody whose name was not written in the Lamb's Book of Life was thrown into the lake of fire. That's what it says. The next chapter, come, I'll show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And behold, I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, descending out of heaven as a bride prepared for her wedding. And then it says, right after that, nobody who does wicked, nobody who practices evil, no one who does witchcraft, who is a sorcerer, who is involved with idolatry is allowed into the city. Well, if everybody whose name was not written in the Lamb's Book of Life just got thrown in the lake of fire, why would they not be allowed into the city? Yeah, it's a good question. It's because all through Revelation we see this. It's like, here's the test, here's this list. And then the narrator goes back and says, let's talk about this, let's talk about this, let's talk about this. And then they go some more, here's some more. Let's talk about this, let's talk about this, let's talk about this. So there are times in Scripture, and I could do this. It's called feed forward. I do this all the time when I'm teaching. So today, when we get together today, we're going to talk about Matthew 24. We're going to go through verses 1 through 24. We're going to talk about deception. We're going to talk about the end times and what's going to happen with our love. And we're going to talk about the final entity that will ultimately come that's known as the beast. Let's get started. And then I jump in. Matthew 24 verse 1, and we start reading, right? I gave you everything that we were going to talk about as a punch list, and now I'm going back and we're starting to cover in the details. We're going to see that in prophecy over and over and over again. So get in your mind that these prophecies that we see are teachings with the intent of understanding, not necessarily chronology, right? Not necessarily chronology. Revelation 19 through 22 is a perfect example. It's not chronological. It's a punch list, and then he goes back and he starts filling in the blanks. Let's keep going. But he that will endure to the end of the same will be saved. The end of the same, the end of the sorrows. We went from the beginning of sorrows, deception, wars, rumors of wars, people killing one another because of my name. They jump in, many will wax cold because their love will wax cold. It's going to, the breeze will blow over it. It's going to, their love is going to dehydrate, right? Evaporate. The end, but the one that endures to the end of these things, to the end of sorrows, the same shall be saved. And this is the gospel of the kingdom that will be preached in all the world for a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. Then the end will come. So Jesus says, look, the people who make it to the end of all the sorrows, they'll be saved. The gospel will be preached everywhere, and then the end will come. Did Jesus say anything about his return yet? No. Hasn't brought it up. Hasn't been a topic yet. Right? So, what's the next thing Jesus says? When you therefore